Greetings everybody, coming to you today from my 2014 Mercedes-Benz GLK 250 BlueTech diesel. So somebody made a comment on one of my recent videos in which I had mentioned I've owned about 125 cars in my life, and I had mentioned something about my top 5 favorite, but I didn't really go into details. Well, that person asked me to list my top 5 favorite cars, and I thought that would be a good topic for a video for those of you who might be interested in my ramblings. So we'll start with number 5. Number 5 is actually a collection of 4 cars, including one that I own today, and I've made a bunch of videos about it, and that would be all of my Nissan Versas. So I've owned a 20, 2 21s, and my current 23. For me, why I like that car so much is I grew up with small economy cars. I had Volkswagen Beetles when I was in high school and college, and then I transitioned. I had like a 86 Dodge Colt, which actually I really liked. That one would probably make the top 10. I had a 96 Hyundai Accent. That may also be top 10, not sure. But I just always really liked the feel, the sound of a cheap economy car. And as much as possible, given all the safety standards and everything that are in cars today and the electric power steering, I'm going to say the new Versa S manual, has to be a manual transmission. It stands as number 5 for me because it really comes very close to replicating. Side note, this is our first snow of this season. To replicating the feel and drive of those old 90s economy cars that I liked so much. I'm going to do a quick brake test here. This road is particularly slick for some reason. I think it's because a lot of the oil and gas trucks drive on it and they leak. I was going to be a little bit more careful on this road, well, mainly when it's wet. But yeah, so I've done a lot of videos about my Versas, so I don't need to go into too much more detail other than that's why it's number 5. Now my number 4 favorite is the one I'm driving now. There's just something about this car that just pushes all the right buttons for me. Number 1, of course, is the diesel engine. And not that this is always a criteria, but this thing has been surprisingly reliable. I did have a couple sort of expensive issues, but they were covered by the extended warranty. I've done some videos about that, but just the comfort, the safety, the sound, I mean, all the way down to the details like the way that it delivers power, the feel of the steering. I believe this does have electric power steering, but man, did they get it right on this car. It feels extremely close, almost imperceptibly so, to hydraulic steering. I like the way the transmission shifts. It just always seems to find the right gear. Gear changes are smooth. And it just makes me feel good to drive this car. I just really like this. Excuse me. And this one is my primary driver. So it's going to be racking up the most miles of all the cars I've owned. Or all the cars I currently own. Alright, on to number 3. I've made a few videos about this. I wasn't really as extensively into making videos about my cars when I owned it. And that would be my 2014 Chevy Cruze diesel. Now that car is pretty unique in my my car ownership history. in that I bought it brand new and I put 206,000 miles on it. That was back when I drove a lot for work. I did that in 3.5 years. I adored everything about that car from the moment I took the test drive, which I actually have my test drive video on YouTube for those of you who are interested. I have my friend with me, and you can hear her talking in there. But yeah, I was just hooked. That car I just absolutely loved, and it was surprisingly reliable. I want to say it didn't necessarily leave me stranded, but I do consider that what happened to it did kind of leave me stranded because I had it towed to the dealer, and I think that was the first major issue. Was it like 176,000 miles? Then, I mean, it had a couple things here and there, but overall it was super reliable. Super fun to drive. That's also a quality of the one I'm driving now. Super fun to drive. Well, all of them are. And it was just so unique, and it was kind of funny because I could go to Chevy dealers and they had no idea. Even the salespeople, even when they were still new and being sold, the salespeople had no idea that a Chevy Cruze diesel existed. And I actually drove a couple hours to buy that car because I was so excited about it when it first came out. I drove basically to get the first one I could get my hands on. I love that car. I really would like to get another one. There are some various reasons why I got rid of it, but I would love to have another one. Okay, so number 2. Number 1 and 2, it's kind of hard to rank them, so I'm just gonna kind of be a little arbitrary here. But number 2 is a car I bought when it was about 10 years old for about $800. It might have been a little older than that. It was a 1985 Chrysler Laser XE Turbo with a 5-speed. It had every option except the sunroof. I bought it from the original owner. I don't remember what he was asking for it, but I was like, would you take $800 for it? And he said yes. Now that car, it was reliable and problematic. It never left me stranded, but it did have issues like head gaskets and starters and whatever, but I did not care. I just, whenever it broke, I got it fixed. It had the voice function on it. It would talk to you, and the voice function actually saved the engine, because when I had the head gasket issue, it basically said, please check your coolant level, and I was getting ready to make a 2-hour trip in it. So it was burning the coolant in the combustion chamber, so it wasn't a horrible leak. I topped it up and made it home, and then got that fixed. But I was hooked from the test drive in that car as well. I'll never forget this. I, up to that point, had been used to cars like I described, the old Volkswagen Beetles with maybe 40 horsepower. I think I had one 1600, which maybe had 50 something. I had my Colt, which probably had all of 48 horsepower. Man, that thing was slow, but I loved it anyway. And so I got so used to slow cars. They were just the norm to me. So this is the first time, I didn't even know what a turbocharger was at the time I test drove that car, but I'll never forget the first time I'm accelerating. I want to say it was in second gear, and at 3,000 RPMs, that turbo kicked in, and I felt that sudden rush of power, and it just put this grin on my face. I never even realized that a car could do something like that. I was just immediately hooked. I had to have that car. it was quite an experience. It was just an amazing thing. I did buy it for $800, and I mean, it had to go into the shop every few months for something, but no problem. I ended up putting 50-some thousand miles on that car, and then I ended up selling it for a stupid reason. One time I was merging on the highway, and I want to say these are both on the same incident. There might have been two different incidents, but it made a plume of smoke behind the car, and I got the message power reduced or something like that. Well, the message cleared up after that, and it was fine after that, but I just thought, oh man, there's probably something wrong with this car, and I should sell it. Well, I ended up selling it to this one guy, and just completely regretting it. And I actually saw it on the road maybe a year later, and I followed the guy, and turns out he was ready to get another car, because I followed him and asked him if he wanted to sell it back to me. Well, that ended up being a mistake. He had basically trashed it. It needed a whole new engine and a bunch of other stuff. I actually had the engine rebuilt and put a rebuilt turbo on it, but the turbo was junk. It never ran right. Tried to have somebody paint it for me and do body work, but they basically took the money and ran. I mean, just a learning experience all around. But that's another one. I just should have kept it, and just kept it maintained. I think the guy that I bought it back from ran 87 octane in it, and see, I want to actually go straight this time. You do not want to do that in those cars, because they'll ping really bad, and it'll just destroy the head. There was like an actual crack in the head where you could see oil bubbling up around the spark plugs. But you know, the first time through, it was fantastic, and just an all-around amazing car. And then that takes me to my number one favorite car. So this is a car I got when I was in college. It wasn't even my first such car. I was obsessed with Volkswagen Beetles, and I believe at the time I had my 75 Beetle, but I actually bought multiple Beetles this way too. I saw it sitting in somebody's driveway. It had, I still have a bunch of pictures of it, which is fantastic. It had a bunch of patina. It was basically blue, but it had all the different fading. You could see a little bit of white, a little bit of other various colors. It had sat for, I'm not sure how long, but it wasn't running. I didn't care about that. I actually had a friend when I was in college. This was when I was a freshman in college. His dad was a mechanic, and he knew all about cars, and he was just really happy to help me revive the car. I mean, it would be like the classic revival video today. I wish I had actually had some video footage of that car from back in the day, but yeah, we had to do things like, I remember shoving a clothes hanger into the fuel line to break through, because the fuel had turned to tar, and rebuilding the carburetor and rebuilding all the brakes. And I remember he said we had to go get a brake backing plate for some reason. I still don't completely understand what that was all about. Let's see, I've got a merge here. Highway, a little bit of accelerating. All right, a little bit of merging action going on, and so the yeah, we did the whole revival thing, and got it running. I ended up driving that car for about 3 years as well. It was a fantastic car. I mean, it always needed something, but I was armed with the knowledge of how to fix it, how to keep it up, thanks to my friend. You know, it was because of that experience that I learned how to work on cars and was able to work on cars myself. But just the driving pleasure I got from that car was just absolutely amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of driving that car. I drove it everywhere and in all kinds of weather, and I had all kinds of experiences with that car. Eventually, at one point, I think it was because I maybe didn't adjust the valves enough, it dropped the valve on the number 3 cylinder. I'd actually driven it with some friends to Chicago and back, and it was overheating really bad. I didn't really realize or understand exactly what I was doing to the engine, but it was running on 3 cylinders, so it's a wonder we were able to even keep up speed on the highway. It had the original 40 horse engine in it. Eventually that valve dropped. I was on my way to work, and just major engine carnage, and ended up putting the engine from a Beetle I wrecked into it and converting it to 12 volts, and proceeded to drive it for a while after that. At the time, that felt like so much power, going from the 40 horse 1200 to the 1600 dual port out of a 73 Super Beetle. I think it was a 73, it might have been a 74, but yeah, super fun car. I just absolutely loved it. And you know, that's actually what inspired me to recently buy my 60 Beetle that I have some videos about. It's a different experience today than it was back then. I still do enjoy driving it, but once you get used to modern cars, going back to a car like that, it's kind of a mixed experience for me. But at the time, it was just fantastic. Anyway, that is my top 5 favorite cars, and why they made the list out of like 125 cars. So if you made it this far, thanks for listening. Drop some of your favorite cars down there in the comments. All right, have a great